I'm Dan Kubisky with the Society of Professional Journalists International Community. The news is full of reports how the closure of the Straits of Hormuz has impacted oil availability in the world. Sometimes fertilizer is mentioned along with the oil in those stories, and to my mind, not often enough. About half the world's urea, this is a nitrogen fertilizer, normally flows through the straits. But now we have reports that nothing is moving. We also hear that many of the fertilizer producers have shut down production rather than have warehouses full of material. Last year, the United States imported about 2 million tons of urea from the Middle East out of a total of 5 million total. Then there's 18 million or so tons that are produced in the US. So the absolute amount of urea being imported from the Middle East is not a large portion of the US demand. And yet the price of urea is rising, as are the prices of other fertilizers. Now, I should say at this point that I've been covering the global fertilizer market for more than 30 years for Green Markets, which is a Bloomberg publication. So I know a little bit about the situation, but I have someone much more knowledgeable about the impact of the current shortage and price increases of fertilizers on the US and the global markets. Alexis Maxwell is a senior analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. She looks at the global fertilizer situation and its impact on the domestic and global markets. And each time we talk, I always learn something new, or at least a new way to ask questions of my sources. Alexis, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Okay. Now, I think anyone looking at the large picture in the Middle East will agree restricting oil imports is a problem. But so is the restriction on fertilizer exports. Could you just give us a back of the envelope type of explanation why the lack of fertilizer flowing through the Straits of Hormuz is impacting the US market?
So, fertilizer is a necessary global commodity that mostly moves along quietly in the background and unnoticed. However, with the continued attacks along the Strait of Hormuz, we see about just a little bit more than 1/3 of the world's nitrogen unable to go to market. Nitrogen is the most critical crop input for effectively all crops planted around the world, and it's going to have an outsized impact on farmers who are ready to start planting here in the second quarter. That's really farmers that you're going to see in places like Europe, um, Australia, and the United States. And the longer that this drags on, the more that we will see farmers around the world be impacted by this outage. Second half of the year, we're looking at really uh, large impacts on farmers in Brazil and India.
And, and even though the US does not import a lot from that region, we're still feeling the impact of this cutback. Why is that?
Yeah, so in the United States, we are import dependent on fertilizers. That means we need the last marginal ton to meet demand from an offshore source. So we have to go to the global market to purchase our nitrogen. And so therefore, we will be paying global prices to get that last ton. So our farmers here in the US, we are exposed to the global markets and global pricing. Urea prices, the first week of this conflict shot up 35% in 1 week.
And they continue to
Uh,
rise. We're seeing, in our Bloomberg reporting,
yeah.
almost every day we're seeing new increases. Now, this is such a big picture item, but
Mhm,
we're talking about people in Ames, Iowa, Detroit, Michigan,
mhm.
Grand Rapids, Michigan. How are they being impacted? And then just think about maybe reporters for the local newspapers or television stations. Are there ways that they can look at this fertilizer situation and come up with some story ideas that show the impact?
Yeah, so the US farmer, all across the Midwest, from western states like Nebraska up north into North Dakota, and then through the southeast and northeast part of the US, all those farmers are going to go purchase their fertilizers here in the second quarter for applications for their spring plantings. So they do this by working with some companies that you may know, some of the big names in the agriculture space, like ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus might be suppliers for fertilizers. And then these farmers are going to work with their local, um, like farm journals, publications, and also their local extension agents or universities, some land grant universities like Purdue, University of Illinois, to get their agronomic advice in order to understand how they should be responding to these relatively higher fertilizer prices. Because Dan, what we're seeing and what makes this so difficult for farmers right now is farmer margins are really stretched in the United States. If we were to look at the difference between farmer prices paid and farmer prices received, that spread is the widest negative margin that we have in records going back to 2011. So a lot of pain out in the farm economy. And that was all prior to this escalation in urea pricing, that 35% increase in the first week of March that I mentioned. If we look, if we were to look at the relative price of these fertilizers, because farmers are always evaluating, if I put on a little extra fertilizer, will I get paid out in terms of crop output and crop pricing? And if we look at the relative price of urea to corn, we touched 134 last week, and the record in data going back to the 70s is 143. And I expect we'll probably breach that record in the coming weeks.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, everybody's talking about record prices around the world. Uh, and this is what I want to just touch on lastly is
Mhm.
the part of the global impact. Now, there are countries that are much more dependent on Middle East urea and other fertilizers, phosphates and sulfur and
Yeah.
potash as well. Some of these countries like India, Brazil, Thailand. Uh, what's your sense of how they're dealing with the situation? Do you see some economic problems? Do you see some political problems in these countries?
Yeah, I think farmers globally are very sensitive to the price that they pay for their inputs. And I'm expecting that as farmers go to dealers and dealers say, we just don't have it, or it's at a price that you can't afford to pay, farmers are going to respond. I think the classic image is, sort of with their pitchforks and crowds and protests. And so then it's really kind of, what farmers are going to open up that bin first and have that conversation with their local dealer. And so we're going to see shortages probably in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, probably first. I should also mention the European Union. They will be going to do their plantings here in the second quarter. Um, but really, Dan, this is going to become a story all around the world because the Middle East, in terms of the urea that they ship around the world, urea is the most commonly used form of nitrogen fertilizer. It goes everywhere around the world. So a lot of impacts on local populations coming soon.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, of in this short
Yeah,
interview of things you'd like to talk about?
sure. I would just say that here we are on the 16th of March, and the damage to the world's agriculture economy really has already been done. Um, I would say that from a farmer's perspective, they operate with a very tight window where they need fertilizer. And for most farmers who plant in the spring portion of the of the year in the northern hemisphere, that window is March, April, May. And so even if the war were to end, let's say tomorrow, we'd have to restart plants, move material out the door. And I would say we've probably already missed most of the application window in getting that additional Middle East supply to the world.
Wow. It's a serious issue. I do wish some more of the mainstream media would cover this
Hmm.
and explain it as well as you just did for us. Alexis Maxwell, senior analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Thank you very much for taking time from your very busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you for having me.